They laughed at me, said I was too poor to matter, said I couldn't even buy them the gifts they deserved. Those words cut deeper than any knife. But what my grandchildren never expected was that I had been carrying something far greater than money, a secret that would one day change everything. My name is Beatrice, though most call me Bea. I'm 75 years old, and life has taught me to live modestly, to stretch every penny, and to hold on to what truly matters. Yet, that lesson is something my daughter and her children never cared to learn. They wanted luxury, gadgets, and expensive clothes. And when I could no longer keep up with their endless wishes, they branded me with a word no grandmother should ever hear, poor. I remember their smirks that afternoon, the way their eyes swept across my little house as though it were nothing but a burden. They saw faded wallpaper, secondhand furniture, and an old woman with shaky hands. What they didn't see was the truth. A truth I had kept locked away for decades, waiting for the right time. And that time was closer than any of us knew. Before I share the rest of my story, let me pause for you. Yes, you watching this right now. Because I know life is not always easy, especially as the years pass. Our bodies ache in ways we never expected. Our memories sometimes slip like sand through our fingers, and too often, we feel forgotten by the very people we raised. So I want to take a moment to speak a blessing over you. May your bones stay strong, may your mind remain clear, and may peace settle in your heart like the comfort of a warm quilt on a winter night. If you are in your 60s, 70s, 80s, or beyond, may you never feel alone. May your children and grandchildren learn to honor you, not for what you give them, but for the wisdom, love, and sacrifices you've poured into their lives. And if you carry secret struggles, whether it's illness, loneliness, or quiet worries you've never spoken aloud, I pray you find strength, healing, and joy in the days ahead. Because let me tell you, you are more valuable than gold, and your worth is not measured by the gifts you give, but by the love that flows from your spirit. The memory of that day still stings. My daughter stood in my living room, scrolling on her phone, barely noticing me. My granddaughter tore open a neatly wrapped box and scoffed at the little birdhouse I had painted by hand. My grandson laughed, mocking me with words that seared my heart. "Looks like you're too poor to buy us gifts, Grandma." They didn't know the weight of their cruelty. They didn't see the years I had spent scrubbing floors, skipping meals, and stretching a single pension check just to keep a roof over my head. They didn't see how I sold my husband's tools, his car, even his beloved radio, to pay for medicine and bills. To them, I was just an old woman with nothing left to offer. But here's the truth they couldn't see. I wasn't poor. I was guarding something far greater than money. Something my late husband had left behind. Something powerful enough to change not only my life but theirs as well. They thought they could measure my worth in gadgets and clothes, but what I had hidden would show them the true meaning of legacy. And if you're listening right now, I want you to stay with me. Because this story is not just about me and my ungrateful family. It's about dignity, betrayal, strength, and the sweet taste of justice. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Whether you're in New York, Los Angeles, London, or anywhere in between, I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that like button so more people can share in these lessons of life. My name is Beatrice, though most people just call me Bea. For 75 years I have lived with very little, and yet my life has always felt full. My little house isn't much to anyone else, but to me it holds my whole world. The walls are faded, the furniture is secondhand, and the curtains have long lost their color, but each mark, each scratch, carries a memory. When I sit in my living room, I see not worn-out things, but the life Arthur and I built together. Arthur was my husband, my partner, my anchor. He was an engineer, a man whose mind never stopped working. If something was broken, Arthur would fix it. If something didn't exist, he would design it. I can still hear the hum of his tools from the shed late into the night, and I can still smell the faint trace of solder on his shirts. He was happiest when he was building something new, something he believed could make the world better. Since Arthur passed, this little bungalow has been my safe place. It's not fancy, but it's mine. I wake up each morning, fold the same quilt Arthur's mother sewed for us, and thank God I still have a roof over my head. I stretch my pension check as far as it will go. I bake apple pies, I mend my clothes. I knit scarves even though my hands ache from arthritis. Life is quieter now, lonelier. Yes, but I've always believed in being grateful for what I have. But my daughter Caroline doesn't see life the way I do. She grew up in this very house, but somewhere along the way she decided that love and effort weren't enough. To her, worth is measured in the size of a bank account and the brand names on clothing tags. Whenever she visits, her eyes sweep across my living room as if she's calculating how much everything costs or how little. She never sees the memories stitched into the cushions or the laughter those old walls once held. Caroline's children, Lily and Marcus, have inherited her attitude. Lily is 16, Marcus is 14, and both of them carry themselves with the impatience of people who believe the world owes them more. When they walk into my home, it's as though they're stepping into a place that embarrasses them. Lily can't put her phone down long enough to even look at me, and Marcus mumbles greetings without lifting his eyes from his screen. I try not to let it hurt, but deep down it does. Still, I love them. I love them more than they will ever know. And because of that love, I keep trying. Every year, I spend weeks preparing little gifts, things I make with my own two hands. I believe gifts should carry thought, not just price tags. One year I knitted sweaters for each of them, spending countless hours even as my wrists ached. Another year I put together photo albums, filled with family pictures, hoping they would treasure the memories. But year after year, I watched those gifts get tossed aside, barely acknowledged. What they wanted were expensive things. Tablets, phones, sneakers that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. They wanted things I could never afford. That summer afternoon, when they pulled into my driveway in their shiny SUV, I had already set the table with iced tea and apple pie. I wanted them to feel welcome, to feel at home. I told myself this time would be different. I had painted a small ceramic birdhouse for Lily. It took me weeks to finish, my hands steadying themselves as best they could while I painted tiny hummingbirds along the sides. I had seen something similar at a craft fair selling for $100, but mine wasn't about the money. It was about love. Caroline stepped out of the SUV first, phone pressed to her ear, her voice clipped and hurried. "I can't stay long, Mom," she said, not even looking me in the eye. "Meeting with the agent in an hour. Just hand over the gifts, we'll eat later." Lily and Marcus followed behind. "Hey, Grandma," Marcus mumbled without glancing up from his phone. Lily wrinkled her nose. "Are we seriously staying in this heat? I'm going to melt." I offered them iced tea. I offered them pie. They declined with shrugs. My heart sank a little, but I held on to hope as I handed Lily her gift. She tore the paper away with no pause, no smile, and when she saw the birdhouse, her lips curled. "A birdhouse? Are you serious? You know, I don't even like going outside." Marcus barked out a laugh. "Looks like you're too poor to buy us gifts, Grandma. Don't worry, we get it." Those words, they hit me harder than any fall I've ever taken. Too poor. They didn't see my effort, my thought, my love. All they saw was what I couldn't give them. My cheeks burned, my stomach tightened, and I forced a weak smile. "I thought it might be something special," I whispered. Caroline didn't give me a chance to say more. She snatched the birdhouse from Lily's hands, stuffed it back in the box, and said briskly, "We'll just go." She gave me a quick hug, more like a pat on the back, and within minutes they were gone, the sound of their engine fading down the street. Silence filled the house. Heavy, suffocating silence. I sat down on the sofa, the springs groaning beneath me, and picked up an old photograph of Arthur and me. We were so young in that picture, standing proudly in front of this house. His smile seemed to shine through time itself. Looking at it, I felt the sting of my grandchildren's words all over again. Too poor. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I sat there with that photograph, whispering to Arthur's memory, "They don't know. They have no idea what we built, what you left behind." Because the truth is, I was not poor. My family saw faded wallpaper, but they didn't see the hidden strength that still lived inside this house. They judged me by what I couldn't buy, but they didn't know the secret I had been protecting for years, a secret Arthur had entrusted to me, a secret powerful enough to change everything. That day, their cruelty hurt me more than I can ever put into words. But their insult lit a fire in my heart. A fire that whispered, "One day they will see who I truly am. One day they will understand what I've been holding on to all this time." After my family drove away that day, I sat on the sofa with Arthur's photograph in my hands. My fingers traced his face as though the warmth of his smile could still pass through the faded paper. I whispered to him like I often did when the house felt too empty. "They called me poor Arthur. Too poor to matter. They don't know the truth about you, about us." I leaned back and closed my eyes, letting the memories of him wash over me. He had always been the dreamer, the one with ideas too big for the shed he worked in. While I handled the library and raised Caroline, Arthur would disappear into that workshop. Sometimes I'd bring him tea, and he'd grin at me with sawdust in his hair and grease on his hands. "Just a little longer, Bea," he'd say, his eyes alight. I never pressed him for details. I trusted him. He was my husband, my partner, and if he wanted to keep his projects private, that was his right. But after he died, I discovered there was more to his silence than I had ever guessed. That evening, the insult from my grandchildren echoing in my head, I found myself wandering down the hallway to the old closet. It was a small space filled with coats no one wore anymore and a vacuum cleaner that barely worked. To anyone else, it was just clutter. But to me, it carried a different weight. Arthur had once told me, almost in passing, "Don't lose the key, Bea. One day you might need it." I never forgot the way he said it, quietly, seriously, as if it was more than just a husband's quirk. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out a small silver key I'd kept hidden for years. My hands shook as I knelt down, my knees aching. I pressed the key along the floorboards, searching, until I felt it slide into a small, almost invisible opening in the wood. A soft click broke the silence, and a tiny panel lifted open. Inside was a worn leather book. Dust clung to its surface, and the moment I touched it, a flood of emotions hit me. Arthur's handwriting filled the pages, elegant, deliberate, every line drawn with purpose. My heart pounded as I began to read. The first pages were filled with notes about his projects, the same ones I used to hear him talk about late at night when he thought I was asleep. He wrote about a company called Novatech, where he had been one of the lead engineers. At first, the entries were steady, almost hopeful. He described designs for energy systems, ideas for efficient power cells that could transform households. His words carried pride, the kind of pride a man feels when he knows he's building something that matters. But as I turned the pages, his tone changed. The sentences grew sharper, angrier. He wrote about betrayal, about colleagues who stole his ideas, about a man named Alex who pushed him out of his own project. "He only cares about profits," Arthur scrawled in heavy ink. "He'll cut corners until someone gets hurt. They've forced me out, Bea. They don't want my name on what I created." My throat tightened as I read his pain, captured on those pages. I had thought his retirement was peaceful, that he had chosen to leave. I never knew he had been shoved aside, discarded like an old tool once the company thought it didn't need him anymore. Arthur didn't stop there. He wrote about building something new, something better. A prototype that couldn't be corrupted by greed. A project he called his failsafe. He described it as a smaller version of the real thing, hidden away for safekeeping. Then came a line that made me sit back, my breath catching. "The key is only the beginning. The safe holds the truth. If I cannot finish it, Bea will one day hold what I could not." My hands trembled. A safe? Hidden where? I flipped through the journal frantically, scanning for more. There were diagrams of strange devices, circuits, and boxes I couldn't understand. Numbers and dates scattered the margins, like clues waiting to be solved. Tucked between 2 pages was a photograph. It showed Arthur smiling beside a heavy metal box, an old-fashioned safe. My eyes darted back to the closet around me. The coats. The paneling. The floorboards. Could it be here, right under my nose all this time? I pushed the coats aside, my fingers tracing the wall. It looked ordinary, but I knew Arthur well enough to know he always built with secrets in mind. As I pressed along the baseboard, my thumb found a small groove. I pushed down hard, and with a soft snap, part of the molding shifted outward, revealing a hidden panel of metal. I gasped. He had built it into the house itself. The plate was smooth except for a faint indent, far too small for my finger. My pulse quickened as I returned to the journal, flipping until I found an entry dated July 12, 1985, our wedding anniversary. The numbers were written carefully, as though he wanted to make sure I wouldn't miss them. July 12, 85. I tried the combination. My hands shook so badly I had to steady them against the wall. The dial clicked once, twice, and then stopped. Nothing happened. My heart sank. But a few pages later, I saw another entry with a second set of numbers. November 23rd, 89. I stared at it, confused. That date meant nothing to me. It wasn't our anniversary, not Caroline's birthday, not the day we bought the house. Still, I knew Arthur. He didn't write anything without reason. I sat there on the closet floor for hours, the journal open in my lap, rereading his words, tracing his handwriting with my fingers. My mind buzzed with questions. What was in the safe? Why two combinations? What had Novatek stolen from him? The silence of the house seemed heavier than ever, but my heart was no longer only filled with pain. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of something I thought I had lost: purpose. Maybe my grandchildren were right that I couldn't buy them gadgets, but they were wrong to think I had nothing of value. I had something worth more than any tablet, more than any car, more than all the luxuries Caroline flaunted. I placed the journal carefully on the table beside me and whispered, "Arthur, what did you leave me?" I closed the closet door, my mind racing faster than it had in years. If what I read was true, then my family's insult, their careless words about me being poor, might become the very thing that opened a door to the greatest revelation of my life. Could this change everything? Tell me, honey, have you ever discovered a secret left behind by someone you loved? Maybe an old letter, a photograph, a journal hidden away? Drop your answers in the comments. I'd love to know if your family ever kept something from you that only surfaced later. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and like this video. Your support helps keep these stories alive. For days, I couldn't think about anything except Arthur's journal and the hidden panel in the closet. I must have read those entries 100 times, running my fingers over the ink as if the pages themselves might whisper the answers I needed. The first date was simple: July 12th, 1985. Our anniversary. I knew that one. But the second date, November 23rd, 1989, left me puzzled. I sat at the kitchen table with the journal open, the hum of the old refrigerator filling the silence. "Arthur," I muttered under my breath. "Why that date? What did you mean by it?" The more I thought about it, the more desperate I became. A letter from the electric company sat on the counter, its red warning bold and harsh. I had barely enough to keep the lights on, and the notice said they'd cut the power in 48 hours if I didn't pay. At 75, the thought of sitting in the dark with no fan, no oven, no lifeline terrified me. I clutched that letter in one hand and Arthur's journal in the other. My family called me poor, but maybe, just maybe, Arthur had left me something to prove them wrong. I turned the journal back to the entry where he wrote about Novatek. His words burned on the page. They stole my work. Alex pushed me out. They think they can bury the truth, but they won't. Not if B finds it. Novatek. I remembered the name from his working years, though he rarely spoke of it at home. Something about that date had to be connected to the company. I pulled out my old laptop, a clunky thing with keys that stuck. After an hour of frustration, I finally found an archived news article online. The headline read, "Novatek unveils new autonomous power cell." The article was dated November 24th, 1989, the day after the mysterious numbers in the journal. I read every line, my eyes racing. The man being praised was Alex, not Arthur. Arthur's name wasn't mentioned at all. But at the bottom, a single sentence caught my attention. A preliminary patent for the design was filed yesterday under the working title Project Nightingale. My breath caught. Nightingale. That was Arthur's favorite bird. He had used the name before for small projects he loved. I whispered it out loud. Nightingale. It felt like he had left the word there for me, like a trail to follow. I rushed back to the closet, my knees aching as I dropped to the floor again. The safe was still there, its metal face cold beneath my palm. I turned the dial to July 12th, 85. Click. My heart jumped. Something shifted inside, and then a second dial slid into view. This was it. The second combination. I tried November 23rd, 89. Click. Another sound, deeper this time, echoed from the mechanism. My pulse raced. I gripped the handle and pulled. At first, it didn't budge, and I thought my heart would stop from disappointment. But then, with a groan of old metal, the door creaked open. I expected money. Or maybe bonds. Something simple. Something to pay off the bills. But what I saw made my mouth go dry. Inside the safe was a small black box, no bigger than a hardback book, with faint blinking lights on its surface. Beside it were stacks of documents, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. The top page bore a title that made me gasp: Patent Application, Unlimited Household Energy Cell. My hands trembled as I lifted the papers. This wasn't the Novatech project from the article. This was something far more powerful. Arthur had created a design that could provide clean, endless energy for a single home, and he had secured it under his own name. The application was dated August 15, 1989, months before the company paraded their fake success. Attached was a letter addressed to a law firm in New York, transferring all rights to me if anything happened to him. Tears blurred my vision. All those nights he had spent in the shed, all the times I thought he was simply tinkering, he was building this. He had been protecting me, even in his final years. But as I read further, grief twisted into something sharper. Anger. Novatech hadn't just pushed him out. They had stolen from him. They filed a false patent to bury his real one. They celebrated Alex as a visionary while Arthur suffered in silence, stripped of recognition for his genius. And all the while, I had sat at home thinking his retirement was peaceful. I pressed my hand to my chest, my heart aching with the weight of it all. He had trusted me with this, and I hadn't even known. My grandchildren called me poor. My daughter dismissed me as old and useless. But here I was holding proof that Arthur and I had built something extraordinary, something that could change the world. I picked up the black box, the small prototype he had hidden away. Its lights blinked steadily, almost like a heartbeat. My reflection stared back at me from its shiny surface, and I whispered, "Arthur, you clever man. You didn't leave me with nothing. You left me with everything." For the first time in years, I felt power rush through me. Not the kind that comes from money, but the kind that comes from truth. I wasn't poor. I wasn't forgotten. I was the keeper of Arthur's final gift. Still, fear tugged at me. What would I do with this? How could one old woman stand against a company like Novatech? And what would happen if my family found out? Would Caroline try to take it from me? Would she sell me out just as easily as she had tried to sell my house? I wiped my eyes and placed the documents back in the safe, my mind spinning. The electric bill still sat on the counter unpaid. The house still felt heavy with loneliness. But now, I knew I had something that could change everything. I closed the safe gently, locking it once more, but inside me a new determination burned. My family thought they had humiliated me, but they had only awakened the strength I thought I had lost. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice. About reclaiming Arthur's legacy and proving that I was never the poor old woman they believed me to be. Let me ask you, honey, what would you do if you found something hidden away that could change your family's future forever? Would you protect it? Would you share it? Or would you keep it secret? Tell me in the comments. After opening that safe, I couldn't look at my daughter the same way anymore. Every word she spoke to me, every sideways glance, felt different, sharper, colder. I had proof in my hands that Arthur had left me something priceless, something that could change lives. But instead of feeling safe, I felt exposed, because deep down I knew my daughter didn't see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as an obstacle. The phone call came 3 days later. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the patent papers spread before me, when the phone rang. Caroline's voice was sugar-sweet, the kind of tone she only used when she wanted something. "Hi, Mom," she said brightly. "I've been thinking about you. You must be so tired of looking after that old house all on your own. Don't you think it's time you sold it? It would take such a weight off your shoulders." I didn't answer right away. My eyes flicked to the safe in the closet down the hall. My heart pounded. "Why do you say that?" I asked slowly. She hesitated just long enough to give herself away. Well, I just think it's the practical thing to do. A buyer contacted me through a real estate agent. They're very interested in your property, and the timing couldn't be better. You could make a nice profit, and you never have to worry about bills again. Her words chilled me. A buyer? Through her? Caroline wasn't a real estate agent, and she knew I had never asked her to look into selling. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Who's the buyer? Oh, just a company, she said quickly. They're expanding their offices. They want land in your neighborhood. Honestly, Mom, you'd be doing yourself a favor. Houses that old aren't worth much. This is your chance to get out before it falls apart. I closed my eyes, fury rising in my chest. I wanted to scream that I knew exactly why she wanted me out of this house, but I stayed quiet. Instead, I listened carefully, weighing every word. When the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at the journal on the table. Arthur had written about betrayal, about how Novatech had stolen from him. And now, decades later, my own daughter was trying to sell my home to a company desperate to get their hands on what was inside it. My chest tightened with the awful realization. She wasn't acting on her own. Caroline was working with them. I thought back to the last time she visited, how she mentioned casually that she had a meeting with a real estate agent. I brushed it off then, but now it made perfect sense. She hadn't come to check on me out of love. She had come to check on the house. She wanted me gone so the company could swoop in and strip away Arthur's legacy, the same way they stripped him of his career all those years ago. The betrayal stung worse than the insult from my grandchildren. To think that the little girl I once held in my arms, the daughter I had sacrificed everything for, was willing to sell me out for money. It twisted a knife in my heart. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the house, clutching the journal to my chest, whispering Arthur's name like a prayer. They won't take this from me, I muttered. Not you. Not what you left me. By morning, I knew what I had to do. If Caroline was plotting with Novatech, I had to be smarter, stronger, and braver than I had ever been. I couldn't confront her just yet, not until I was ready, but I could prepare. I could protect what was mine. Every call from her after that dripped with false concern. Are you eating enough, Mom? You know, it would be so much easier if you lived in a smaller place. Or, that house is too much for you now. Let me help you find something new. Each time, I bit my tongue, playing the role of the weary old woman she believed I was. But inside, I was taking note. I was waiting for the moment when her mask would slip, when I could show her that I wasn't as weak or as poor as she thought. The more I thought about it, the more the anger inside me grew. For years, I had endured their coldness, their mockery, their dismissal. I had stayed silent, thinking it was my duty as a mother to forgive. But now, I understood something I had been too blind to see before. My daughter didn't just lack respect, she lacked loyalty. She had chosen greed over family. The realization didn't break me. It hardened me. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror, holding the silver key Arthur had left me. My reflection looked back, tired eyes, wrinkled skin, a body weakened by time. But behind those eyes was a fire my daughter had forgotten about. I whispered to myself, "You think I'm powerless, Caroline. You think you can push me aside like they pushed Arthur. But you're wrong. You have no idea what you're up against." The house seemed different to me after that. No longer just a home. It felt like a fortress. Every creak in the floor, every nail in the wall was mine to defend. Arthur's safe wasn't just a box of secrets. It was a shield, and I was ready to wield it. I waited patiently, rehearsing what I would say, planning how I would expose the truth. I wanted her to sit across from me, expecting weakness, and instead find strength. I wanted her to see the legacy she tried to sell for scraps and know that she had lost everything. The confrontation was coming. I could feel it. I knew I couldn't keep quiet forever. Caroline's phone calls had grown more frequent, more insistent, her voice dripping with fake concern. Each time she mentioned selling the house, my stomach twisted tighter. I decided I wouldn't wait for her to corner me. No, I would be the one to call them in. I would set the table, just as I always had, and this time the meal would come with a truth they could never swallow. So I phoned her. "Caroline," I said calmly, "I want you and the kids to come for dinner on Sunday. There's something important I need to tell you." Something that will change everything. She hesitated. For a moment, I heard nothing but the faint click of her tongue, the kind of sound she made when she was trying to contain her excitement. "Of course, Mom," she said sweetly. "We'll be there." That Sunday, I polished the house from top to bottom. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to reclaim my dignity. The curtains were freshly washed, the tablecloth ironed, and the scent of apple pie filled the air. It wasn't just dinner. It was a stage, and I was ready to play my part. Their SUV pulled up right on time. The engine hummed in my driveway, and I could already see their eager faces through the window. They thought I had finally given in. They thought this dinner was about surrender. They couldn't have been more wrong. Caroline stepped inside first, her eyes darting around the room as though she expected to see a sold sign nailed to the wall. Lily and Marcus trailed behind, both glued to their glowing screens. "Mom," Caroline began, her voice just a little too cheerful. "What's this all about? You sounded serious." I gestured toward the sofa. "Sit. All of you. I have a story to tell." Marcus groaned, sinking into the cushions. "Grandma, please don't make this long. I've got stuff to do." Lily rolled her eyes, mumbling, "This better not be about another one of your birdhouses." I folded my hands in my lap, ignoring their disrespect. My voice was steady, stronger than I expected. "This isn't about birdhouses. It's about your grandfather. And about greed." That word, greed, made Caroline's head snap toward me. For the first time in years, I had her full attention. I began at the beginning. I told them about Arthur's years at Novatech, how he was their top engineer, how he poured his heart into designing something that could change the world. I described the betrayal in his own words, read straight from the journal I had found, how Alex stole his ideas, how the company forced him out, how they buried his name to elevate another. Caroline shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Mom, that was decades ago. What does this have to do with anything now?" I fixed my gaze on her. Everything. Because while Novatech was busy parading their false success, Arthur was building something greater. He created a device that could provide clean, endless energy for homes. And he hid it, right here in this house. Lily's phone slipped from her hands, clattering onto the rug. Marcus finally looked up, his mouth hanging open. I stood, walked to the desk in the corner, and retrieved a folder. Slowly, deliberately, I laid a photocopy of the patent on the coffee table. "This," I said, my voice calm, "is his legacy. And it belongs to me. Not to Novatech. Not to anyone else. To me." Caroline snatched the paper, her eyes scanning furiously. The color drained from her face. She looked up at me, her voice trembling. This can't be real." "Oh, it's real," I said evenly. "The law firm confirmed it. Arthur filed it himself, and he left everything in my name. He knew they would try to steal from him, so he made sure I would inherit the rights." The room fell silent. For once, even Marcus didn't have a sarcastic remark ready. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on Caroline's. "You tried to sell this house to them, didn't you? That's what your meetings with the agent were about. You weren't looking out for me. You were working with them. You wanted to hand over Arthur's life's work for a payout." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was louder than any confession. I felt no pity. Not anymore. For too long, I had let her treat me as though I were nothing but a burden. But in that moment, standing tall before her, I felt Arthur's strength flowing through me. I turned to my grandchildren, who sat frozen, their phones forgotten in their laps. "You told me I was too poor to buy you gifts," I said softly but firmly. "But what you didn't know is that I was sitting on more wealth than you could ever imagine. I wasn't too poor. I was protecting something greater than money. Something your grandfather gave his life to create." Lily's face crumpled, her eyes wide with disbelief. Marcus muttered, "No way, this isn't possible." I straightened my shoulders. "It is possible. It is the truth. And it's mine to protect." Caroline dropped the paper onto the table as though it burned her hands. She stood, her face pale, her voice shaking with fury. "You're making a mistake, Mom. You don't understand what you're dealing with." I looked her in the eye, my voice steady as stone. "No, Caroline. You don't understand. You thought I was weak. You thought I was helpless. But you were wrong. I have more power now than you'll ever have, and no amount of greed will change that." Her jaw tightened. For the first time in years, she had no argument, no clever insult, no excuse. She simply turned away, her silence confirming everything I already knew. I looked at Lily and Marcus one last time. I don't need your pity. I don't need your approval. I have something greater than all of that. I have dignity. I have truth. And I have Arthur's legacy. Remember this moment, because you will never forget it. The air in the room was heavy with humiliation. Not mine, but theirs. For once, they couldn't laugh, couldn't sneer, couldn't dismiss me. They had been exposed, their entitlement laid bare. Caroline finally muttered, "Let's go," her voice barely above a whisper. She grabbed her purse, her face tight with suppressed rage, and marched toward the door. Lily and Marcus followed, their eyes downcast, their phones untouched. I watched them leave, the sound of the SUV fading into the distance. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel victory. I felt something better, peace. For years, they had seen me as a weak, poor old woman. But now they knew the truth. I wasn't poor. I wasn't powerless. I was Beatrice, Arthur's wife, the keeper of his genius, and the protector of his legacy. And as the door closed behind them, I whispered to the empty room, "You did it, Arthur." They finally see. When the door shut behind my family, the silence in the house felt different. For the first time in years, it wasn't heavy with shame. It was light, almost freeing. I sat down at the table with Arthur's journal, the patent papers, and the little prototype beside me. My hands rested on them as though I were holding his hand again. I knew exactly what I had to do. The very next morning, I called the attorney listed in Arthur's letter. His voice was deep, steady, and to my surprise, kind. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, "we've been waiting for your call. Your husband left very specific instructions. He wanted you to have full control, and he trusted you would know what to do when the time was right." I told him what Caroline had tried to do, how she had been in contact with a company that wanted my home. He sighed softly and said, "That doesn't surprise me. Novatech has never stopped circling. But don't worry, they can't touch the patent. It belongs to you now, and whatever you decide will stand." Those words lifted a weight off my chest. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. That afternoon, I made my decision. I would sell the house, yes, but not to them. Not to Novatech, not to Caroline, not to anyone who wanted it for greed. Instead, I chose a small, independent real estate firm run by people I trusted. The money from that sale would go into a trust, not for my daughter or grandchildren, but for something far greater. I set up the Arthur Peterson Foundation, a small organization dedicated to funding projects for struggling families, especially those who had been pushed aside, forgotten, or betrayed. People like me. People who knew what it meant to be overlooked. Arthur's invention would not become another prize for the greedy, it would become a blessing for the humble. When Caroline found out, she called me, her voice sharp with anger. "How could you do this? Do you have any idea what you've thrown away?" "Yes," I answered calmly. "I threw away greed. I threw away betrayal. What I kept was dignity. What I kept was Arthur's legacy. And I'm not giving it to anyone who doesn't deserve it." She went silent. For once, she had no answer. As for Lily and Marcus, I haven't seen them since that night. Maybe one day they'll understand. Maybe they won't. But I've stopped waiting for their approval. I don't need it anymore. Because here's the truth. My real revenge was never about money. It wasn't about humiliating them, though I won't pretend it didn't feel satisfying to finally stand tall in front of them. My real revenge was choosing a new path. A path where Arthur's genius helps people who will truly value it, and where I surround myself with a family I choose. Friends, neighbors, strangers who become brothers and sisters through kindness and respect. That's the family I want now. Arthur used to tell me, "B, dignity is worth more than gold." It took me decades, a broken heart, and one unforgettable evening with my own daughter to finally understand what he meant. Dignity cannot be stolen, not unless you hand it over. And I will never hand mine over again. So to you, listening right now, let me leave you with this. Never let anyone define your worth by what's in your pocket. Your true worth is in your love, your strength, and the legacy you leave behind. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think of my choice? If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Or would you have chosen differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all and I'd love to hear your perspective. And don't forget, if this story touched you, give it a like, subscribe to Granny's Tales, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps keep these lessons alive for others who need them. Before I close, allow me to bless you. May your days be filled with peace, no matter the struggles you carry. May your body find strength, even when it feels tired. May your mind remain sharp, and may your heart always remember that you are loved, whether your family says it or not. If you are in your 60s, 70s, 80s, or beyond, know this: you are not forgotten. You are valuable. Your wisdom matters. Your story matters. And may dignity be your crown, one that no insult, no betrayal, and no greed can ever take away. Thank you for watching.